Hi, this is Brendan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Adam Balderstone for another episode of Bedrock and Balderstone to talk about Farscape. We're on, what is this, episode 7 and 8? Or 6 and 7?
Oh, way to put me on the spot right away.
Oh, no, 6 and 7.
This is episode 6 and 7.
6 and 7. So, thank God it's Friday again, and PK Tech Girl. So, I don't know... do you want to give a brief synopsis of Thank God It's Friday before I tell you what I thought of it?
Yeah. It's one where Dargo goes into a weird hyper age thing, which I don't think we'll ever hear of again in the show again. But he goes down to this planet. The rest of the group goes down to investigate him, and he's all happy and chilled out on the planet and working on farming, basically. And they investigate that. There's sinister things going on this planet, and involving the crop that's being grown. And there's also a strange reaction that Rigel has to the food there that ties into everything.
Yeah. This I thought was a really good episode. I really liked it. Yeah. I don't know. I watched it. I was like, I could see that maybe Farscape fans didn't like this episode. I don't know, but I really enjoyed it. It was.
I don't know the consensus on it. This was actually where I was. This was the point where I really started getting excited about the show. I think when I was watching it for the first time, I was like, ooh, yeah, okay.
This felt like really good science fiction to me because it had all the elements I expected. It used the science. It also used the world building. There's the thing. One of the things I like about Star Trek is the world building they do, especially with the races and things like that. And it felt to be like at that level of world building that works well in a show that sort of is airing on a weekly basis or whatever. And also, I thought the fact that the culmination of the plot is Rigel urinating explosives, right? It's the most zany, bizarre thing, but you totally buy it because they've laid all of the groundwork for it. So it makes complete sense when it actually happens, and it didn't elicit a chuckle. Do you know what I mean? I might have laughed, like somebody might have saw that and laughed, but I was just sort of engrossed in the moment and really interested in what was going to happen. And so to me, if you can get away with that, that means you've done something very, very right in a show.
I think I'd say Farscape probably has the most bodily fluids of any science fiction TV show that you'll ever watch.
But the thing is, it wasn't just like, oh, he's reacting weirdly to it, and it tied in with the entire. It was the thing that explained to them the mystery of what was going on. It was a really well made episode, and it had this mystery running throughout it at every point where you're at first you're wondering what's going on with the planet and why everybody's behaving strangely, and you're kind of misled a little bit. Like you first you think it might be one thing, and then you realize that it's the tannet root that they're eating, and then you find out that the tannet root is actually the component of a weapon that the Sebaceans are using, right? So it's a really cool plot, and I don't know, I just like. Because I'm every point in the episode, I'm like, how are they going to end this? Like, I thought this was going to be like an arc that went on for 5 episodes based on everything that was happening, and that they managed to wrap it up the way they did really impressed me.
Well, it is an interesting ending too, because it's the nature of the show and the characters in it. It's like they're like, oh, you're going to have a big uprising against the peacekeepers. Well, okay, good luck. See ya.
Yep. But that's good. We don't necessarily need to get that. We don't need the show to become about them helping these people fight the peacemakers.
No, it's entirely plausible. They've shown them how to use the tannet to make it into a weapon, and okay, you've got a fighting chance now. We're moving on.
And I liked the whole thing of you see 2 of the characters succumb to the tannet root, and you're not really sure what's going on at first. You just know that they seem to be lured to the pleasures of this planet. And it's an interesting place because at first it looks like a pleasure place, like a place of just hedonism, and because Dargo basically is having sex every time we see him on the planet. But they keep talking about how tomorrow's a rest day, and it's like the rest day that never comes because apparently tomorrow's really a work day, and then we're just going to party at night. It kind of reminded me of that movie that you had us see last year with Sean Connery, the
Outland.
movie. Yeah. It reminded me a little bit of that.
Yeah, I could see that definitely. Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, I mean it's a classic mining town thing, you know. I mean, to have this mining town where everyone work does this grueling job, but then they just, you know, drink like crazy at night, and it's a rowdy place.
And I like that there were like a segment of the population that were naturally immune to the tannin root, and they were kind of like the resistance that existed there. But at first you thought there was some weird cult that were using him for nefarious purposes when they put the worm into Crichton.
The worm itself is great. I mean, that's just another weird, crazy kind of Cronenbergian kind of thing with it going through his navel. But
no, it totally worked. Especially since this was like a hedonism plant. Like there was something like I'm just getting over. I'm not even getting over. I still have a stomach bug, and I know that you were probably sick over the weekend. And this episode made me very nauseous. But it was effective. It was very good at sort of like I was grossed out by everything that was going on in the show, and I was wondering. At every step, is D'Argo getting some kind of weird alien virus every time he, like it just everything on the planet felt like it could contaminate you with something. Do you know what I mean? And the worm was sort of the biggest sort of visual cue to that, I thought.
Well, it's done as such a sinister thing, but it's the thing that's saving Crichton.
Yeah.
And and I mean. And then you've got the character of Vol May, who's the leader, and I love the way that, you know, when she first shows up on the first night, and I love just the reaction of of Crichton and so on to her, where it's like he's, you know, she says this weird character, and I feel like his reaction to her behavior is just really, really honest at her just strange eccentricity.
No, I really liked that character a lot. I thought that I don't know was she in anything else, because she seemed kind of familiar, but maybe it was just the performance was hearkening to something I recognized.
Yeah, I looked her up earlier and I did not find her to be in anything I'd heard of before.
Okay.
I mean, she has done other things, but nothing that meant anything to me.
Well, what I also liked is that she was like a mirror of Zahn. It seemed like they had a moment to start where it was clear that there was something very similar about them, and I think you know, and so I liked that there was sort of that parody between those two characters, but she was very unnerving, that lady. She was sort of like, on the one hand, slightly seductive, but also there was something clearly wrong with her that was meant to make you uneasy. And I liked that combination. And I think we had another character like this just like last episode that we were talking about too. I don't know, maybe
we had the Scorpion character in Back to the Future. Yeah.
So it was, and I think it's like you're saying, it's a Cronenberg type thing. There's like a body horror going on in this episode.
Yeah.
And I think in the show in general, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm only 7 episodes in.
I find when Farscape wants to go for body horror, it's generally pretty good at it.
Okay.
I think part of it is the fact too that, you know, when you've got Henson Creature Workshop doing your effects, you know, your average science fiction show is going to have to go with CGI or something, whereas, you know, when you've got Henson on your side, they're gonna make an actual little disgusting worm thing that's really creepy. And it's going to be a real physical thing the characters are holding.
No, that makes all the difference in the world. I know, we've had this conversation before, so we don't need to rehash it, but I just feel like the physical props are what really add to the show here. You know, that everything looks like it's being handled. And so I thought this was a really good episode. And just to kind of, you know, you can give the plot in a moment, but do you have anything more about this episode that you want to
actually
say?
I do. I one thing I like about it is, I mean, obviously, you know, D'Argo is, you know, kind of, you know, controlled by the tannin root to an extent, but I like the fact that it reveals a true thing about him, that he really, you know, that the conversation at the end with Zahn he has, I think, is one of the key parts of the first season and kind of getting to know D'Argo, that he is someone that, he's this warrior guy, but he really does just want to have a farm and settle down and just have this nice life. It's that's a very important part of Dargo's character we haven't seen till now, and it's kind of revealed through this plot.
Well, and I feel like he and Zahn are getting a lot of chemistry, and one of the unresolved issues of that episode is how much of what was going on. Not that they like we didn't see them do anything passionate, but they were having like moments together that were that seemed a little bit tender, like in the fields and stuff. Do you know what I mean? And so how much of that was the Tanit root, how much of that is something that's actually developing between them, whether it's friendship or something else. But, you know, but with a character like Dargo, friendship would be meaningful. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a very, very connecting moment between the two, definitely.
And also I thought that this episode really it smoothly transitioned to the next one very well because, number one, they really did a good job of making sure not just that you remembered the Peacekeepers, but that you had a sense of how extensive their reach was. That this planet that they just kind of ended up on was also, you know, sort of part of their extensive network, and that they were just using it to get materials to make their guns, basically. But in the PK Tech Girl episode, I was totally thrown off by this. It did not go at all in the direction I expected it to go. I never expected this subplot to emerge. That this like love story between what's her name? What's her name?
Jelena.
Between Jelena and Crichton. That surprised me. But it added, I think, necessary complexity to his relationship with Sun. Do you know what I mean? Because you're sort of expecting that those two are supposed to be a couple at some point in the series, and this really complicates that expectation.
Definitely.
But also it happened at a time when Crichton was on the Thank God It's Friday planet. I was having a little difficulty believing his behavior because I was like, this guy has been in space for ages now, alone, without, you know, any outlet for his passions, and he's not responding at all to Zahn's, you know, advances. You know, like, it just seemed a little bit difficult to swallow. But that the very next episode sort of dealt with that. You know, it was like, okay, I can sort of now buy the previous episode.
I think it's kind of, you know, I mean, I think you know, with that, there's just that weird thing of, you know, when you work with people, it's like it can be a little more complicated. It's like, you know,
I get that. It's just that he is in space, like.
Yeah,
jettisoned from his world completely.
I know. I realized there would. My point is that he wouldn't feel, you know, that he would feel nothing. My point is that it would be complicated.
But he was also not responsive to the people on the planet either, the way that Dargo.
Yeah, that I agree with. Yeah. Actually, the Zahn thing I can understand. I was actually going to say that too. That I feel like he may have, at least on the first night, have wanted to get into the little. Debauchery. After that, it makes sense because then he's got the worm, and I mean, we were just talking about stomach pain, and I can see, you know, not being in the mood.
Yeah,
but
I feel like, when Zahn made a move on him, what I was thinking is, well, maybe he doesn't feel comfortable with the people on the planet because he's like, you know, he's really out of his element to begin with, and he doesn't know what's safe, what's not safe. But I figured with Zahn, at least he might have a sense of security and safety. Do you know what I mean? Like, he might, like, that's why I thought that felt like a plausible situation. But either way, it was just one moment where I was like, I don't know if I buy that this guy's totally unresponsive to this, you know, high priestess of pleasure putting the moves on him after he's been, you know, on his own in space for so long. But the thing that the PK Tech Girl brings into it he meets a Sebastian who's basically kind of analogous to him. She's very tech oriented. And I'm glossing over all the other really key elements of the plot, which Adam will describe in a moment.
Yeah, there's lots to get into here.
But basically, it was like, okay, I can buy this because we've sort of established that Sebastians and humans are compatible in some way, and like we've had glimmerings of it with him and Sun. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And but here it's even more of a compatibility because she's actually somebody that he would be interested in if he met her on Earth because they have a lot in common. So I thought that, you know, it sort of addressed a necessary aspect of his personality. And so
yeah, it's a rare chance. He hasn't had many times this season where someone's really respected what he knows and taken him seriously too, which makes a big difference as well. So most of the people on the ship with him, not being tech people, they're just like Crichton. What's his deal?
But yeah, so why don't you tell the plot? Because I just focused on the love story aspect, but there's really a lot more going on here. With PK Tech Girl.
Yeah, so they come across this wrecked peacekeeper carrier, the Zelbinian, and it's not just any wrecked carrier. It was the biggest peacekeeper ship, and something's destroyed it. And as Crichton brings up at the beginning of the episode, why aren't we getting out of here? Whatever run this battle must be really terrifying. And but Dargo wants to go on board because he's looking for navigational information to get home, and Erin wants to get on board because she's a peacekeeper. Well, was a peacekeeper, and she wants to know what happened here. So it matters to her. They encounter Jelena, who's this tech who is the only survivor of a group that was checking out the ship from Crace's ship, who had been in the area and dropped them off.
I do have a question. Did we see her, that character, earlier in the show, or did they just introduced her in this episode?
They just introduced her. You haven't actually seen her. She wasn't on the bridge in any scene or anything.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a good question. No, and but yeah, so basically they have a. They're kind of dealing with her when the Sheangs, which are these space scavengers, show up, and they were the ones who actually wiped out the rest of Jelena's team, and they've come back to pick up more stuff, and so there's a standoff between Dargo and the Sheangs.
Yeah, the Sheangs they reminded me of the I forget the name of the alien race, but like the sort of orcish race that was in Fifth Element. Is what they reminded me of. The minions that were being used by what was his name? Zorg, was that it?
I can't remember. It's been too long since I've seen Fifth Element, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
But they reminded me of those guys. But I liked that part of the story. I liked the standoff between Diargo and what are they, the Sheangs? And I liked the mutiny on their ship and where that went. And I also enjoyed that this started out, I thought it was going to be an alien episode because they go on there.
Yeah, they really push it hard.
And there's even like vision, even when it's not alien, like even when it's clear the episode is not going to get into alien territory, they have Sun looking like Ripley in many, like there's a lot of visual callbacks to Alien. But even having the reveal of Jelena is a lot like the way they find Newt in Aliens. Yeah. So basically everything up to that point is telling you this is going to be an Aliens episode. Then then it becomes a love story. and just for the sake of clarity, the name was Jean-Baptiste Emmanuel Zorg. That was the bad guy in the Fifth Element.
Okay, so you've got that covered. But yeah, I really like the Sheangs a lot too. The interaction between them. Turok, the captain, he has the great closing line about Dargo had nothing, but he used it well. And
yeah, that was my favorite line in the episode. And I like the mutual respect, but I like the fact that he also made a point of saying, "I'm going to kill my clever opponent," at some point.
No, they're really well done characters. I agree. And Lomas, the mutiny one, the one he has to go off on the mission. I love their little like missile launcher things that shoots the torpedoes that they ride in to try and make it through the shield. That was just a really, really great looking little sequence there.
And I like that Crichton and Jelena had to use their tech knowledge to protect everybody from the attacks. I liked just the way that the threats were all sort of balanced out and the way the tension was maintained through the episode really worked. It was also a great way to sort of follow up the previous episode, because the previous episode was kind of a little bit sort of home on the range type. There was a little bit of a lull to it, an interesting lull, but there still was a lull in movement. And I thought that this was a lot more exciting, and so it was a great way to follow up a great episode. And both of them together, I was again, it snowed last night and it's a little dreary here. And I watched the 2 episodes before we did the podcast. And whenever I sit down to watch episodes for a thing like this, we do it so much that I can't help but be honest, because I'm either going to be sitting there miserable working my way through 2 episodes, or I'm going to be enjoying myself. And if I just had 2 hours of misery, I'm going to let Adam know. But this was pleasantly surprising. I was kind of not looking forward to watching the 2 episodes because there were things I just had to get through. But once I started the first one, I was sort of hooked in, and it was no problem watching both of them back to back.
Yeah, I feel like this is where the show really starts to take off. I said to you, thank God it's Friday again. Was the one where I was fine watching the show up to this point, but this was the point where I'm like, oh, okay, I started really tearing through the season at that point. And it's because I think Back and Back to the Future is also a very good episode, but it's kind of a standalone good. But I feel like this is where the characters are really starting to come into focus really well. I feel like things are building. You're getting a bigger sense of the setting. It's everything about it. We haven't even talked about Rigel and the fact that he was a prisoner on this ship and he has to go on board.
That was it. He had his own movie during this episode. It was like it was a whole. He was in a whole other space than everybody. That was. Again, this episode to me was surprising in a lot of ways because I really didn't expect the Jelena character to be trustworthy by the end. And perhaps she's not, because they did let her go and we don't know where that's going to lead. But I was like, oh, she's totally going to betray them. This is all a trap, clearly. And I thought the stuff initially with Rigel was just evidence of it being a trap when it first happened. But then I realized, no, this episode is just taking me in very unexpected paths. And the Rigel path was sort of this introspective delve into his history on the ship, and that really sadistic. I forget the guy's name, but the guy who was torturing him,
Durka.
That was that. I don't know. I didn't realize that Rigel had this past, and it makes Rigel more interesting. Also, I feel like the previous episode, we kind of really saw Rigel. Like I've always been saying, he's kind of a character that can just sit in the background and you don't really care. Not that I don't like the character, but just I'm more interested in the other characters for the most part. But these 2 episodes, he's become more interesting to me, I think. And I feel like he's I don't know, he's just maybe like you're saying, he's sort of taking shape now.
I feel like everything is, and I really I really like the scene too between Crichton and Jelena at the end. Their goodbye scene, the way there's just that kind of humor to this track. It'd be real easy just to make it's a sad scene, but there's just this interaction between them. I feel like the acting in that scene really makes it work in a very good way.
That was a really risky plot line because I was like, oh man, they're going to have these 2 be in love, aren't they? Like when it first started, when you first saw them go that direction, and I was like, I just don't buy it. Like it's like 5 minutes of knowing each other. He's known Soon for so long. Like it just didn't feel plausible. But I think that the actress did a really good job of making those scenes believable and making and I think they had good chemistry. So I think that it worked, but and that's Alyssa Jane Cook is the she played Jelena. She's actually a fairly well-known TV actor. What else has she been in?
No, Australian shows, nothing.
Oh, okay.
So it's like it's like on Australian TV, she's pretty recognizable.
One thing I do want to comment on in general is the casting. I think that the casting has been pretty good for like all of the other people that they bring into the show, the woman that was leading the planet. I can't remember her name, but the lady that was in charge of the
Fulme.
Fulme. She was good, but not just that. Like the physiques of everybody on that planet, I was noticing they all look like farmers to me. Like I don't think they look like farmers. They look like actors who probably go to the gym. But but everybody had that like healthy muscle tone that you would expect from somebody who is laboring on a daily basis. Do you know what I mean? It didn't. And sometimes on these shows, you'll get raggy, skinny people that look like they don't do anything, farming all the time. Do you know what I mean? It's just like I believe that these people were using their hands. And I think that the actress that they got for that role, but also the actors they got for the aliens on I'm not familiar enough with the show, the Xiangs. I thought that they got I feel like the casting is pretty good. And maybe it's just that because it's an Australian show, it's actors that I don't recognize, so I'm not pinning them to other things. Like, even if I don't know an actor by name, if I see them in an American show, I can be like, oh, it's the guy who plays the lawyer in that other show that I saw.
Yeah.
And I'm not able to do that here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, it's a show shot in Sydney, and Sydney does have really good acting schools. And so it's like you've got this whole pool of actors that you just are totally unfamiliar with that are, because obviously there are famous to Americans Australian actors, but, there's a whole lot of them you just never see. And so I think that's one benefit this show has.
And they would be intrusive, like if they inserted Jeffrey Rush into the show somehow.
Oh yeah, exactly.
That you would be like, oh, it's Jeffrey Rush, like in Farscape. It's sort of like in Star Trek when they bring on the celebrity. It stands out. Do you know what I mean? It's sometimes it works because it's Star Trek, but it's a guest appearance. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know. Does Farscape indulge in guest appearances as the show goes on, or are they more reserved?
I mean, I think the most famous people we get are in the main cast as far as ones Americans are recognized. You've got, Zahn, the actress that played Zahn, she's in The Road Warrior in a notable part, and we've also the guy that does the voice of Rigel has a notable part in Mad Max. So
what part did he have in Mad Max?
What's the character's name? He's let's see. I can find it here. He's the guy. He's the police commissioner. I don't need to know his name, but he's the police commissioner in Mad Max.
I didn't realize. We're gonna have to go back and watch the Mad Max movies, I think.
I could live with that.
Yeah, because I just looked up Virginia Hay. She looks so different with hair. Like now it's like, okay, I think I do remember her from that movie. But I would really like to. Are there any other actors from the Mad Max series in Farscape, or are those the only two?
The only two I can think of off the top of my head, but those are. But yeah, as far as I might be forgetting something, but I can't think of many people that are going to come up in in guest appearance roles that are going to be familiar to Americans.
She was also in Living Daylights. It looks like too.
Yeah, she was. She was in Living Daylights. That's right.
I told you that was like the first. I mean, I'd seen James Bond movies before, but that was the first Bond movie I saw in the theater, and that totally shaped my my expectations around Bond movies. Which is probably an odd movie to have as your.
The first one I saw in the theater was Octopussy, so there you go.
So yeah, that's also I could. But yours, but you know what? I would say that was a more popular Bond. I remember Timothy Dalton not being very popular when.
Oh yeah, that's true. You are on it. Yeah. Dalton Bond is an unusual one. I like Timothy Dalton in the role though, but that's another podcast.
Yeah, we should probably. But we do need to do a Mad Max sequence. I think we'll talk about it after the podcast. But I think we're going to have to do this Mad Max thing. But yeah, I really enjoyed both these episodes, and I think that the show is working really well. I particularly feel like I got to know the Sun character more because she was a little bit darker leading up to this, and now she's starting to get more illuminated. Like she just doesn't. She doesn't seem as like maybe she will. She's still probably obviously gonna have to struggle with her past as a peacemaker, and maybe her alliances aren't 100% clear. But I feel like she's becoming more heroic. I will say that she's becoming more heroic as the show goes on. And also, I did not realize how tall she was until I had another love interest to contrast her with the because I'm kind of using Crichton as a measuring stick, and I realized, oh, this woman is much shorter than Crichton, and Sun is like I think a little bit taller than him possibly.
She's got those huge soles on her sneakers though. So
okay, maybe they're using some platform platform.
Yeah, but she's still really tall. That doesn't dispute that.
Well, no, because
in comparison to Crichton, it's tough to say.
I tend to pay a lot of attention to physiques, and so when I noticed that, I was actually looking at her proportions, and she looks like a tall person.
She is a tall person. Yeah, I mean, it's only so tall you can make a a combat boot, but but yeah, she is way taller than Jelena. Yeah, it does really shine through in this episode.
Though I have to say, a lot of the actors on this do seem to be tall. Like the guy that plays Dargo, I think is pretty tall, unless they're just sort of beefing him up and doing tricks with the camera. The woman who plays Zahn seems pretty tall. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, I believe so.
Are Australian people above average height for Americans?
No.
Is that okay?
No.
All right.
No.
Well, there goes my pet theory.
No, there's no. It's just a matter of casting.
Okay.
But they're not an especially tall people. I say, if anything, the other direction.
Okay.
But yeah, I talking about Aaron in this episode, I agree. I mean, obviously having to see Crichton with someone else kind of pushes her into admitting that maybe she was somewhat interested at first, and that in her very stilted way she actually has to address her emotions to an extent.
But I like that, because I didn't expect her to be like that. What's the word? It's like she's sublimating all of her emotions. When she walks in there and she sees them together, she hefts up the I don't know what it was, but it was something that was obviously heavy, and she just like gets all aggressive with whatever work she's doing, but she doesn't actually address the elephant in the room that Crichton wants to address. But it's also interesting because it's clear in that moment that Crichton's intuition to address it is probably wrong. Like Soon's actually being polite when you think about it. Like she was actually giving him the space to have a relationship with this woman, and he kind of goes after her and makes everything super awkward for everybody. So
yeah, exactly. When you put it that way, that's very interesting. Yeah, and I mean, there's the good scene with Aaron and Crichton at the end of the episode. I find, on the whole, Farscape does a really good job with closing scenes, I think. That's, a lot of times you get that closing scene that's just kind of superfluous. But I feel like, last scene you had the one with Dargo and Zahn talking about things, and this one you get the one with Aaron and Crichton talking, and I feel like it added a lot to the episode.
Also, there was a scene with the scene with Pilot was really good. When Pilot is walking her through the steps of analyzing Rigel. Number one, when he's cryo frozen and she pulls off his mustache, and then he says like, "Don't pull off any other protuberances." I suddenly felt the peril that he was in, like any little part of his body that she decided to pick off, just mindlessly could be gone forever. And so I thought that was a really effective moment. But I also was like, wait, is Pilot telling the truth here about his lack of scientific understanding? And because he reveals that he only understands 20% of the specs of the ship, right? Is that what? Or the scientific data?
Science in general. Yeah. I don't know if it's the specs of the ship.
He only understands 20% of the science that's available on the ship. I think that's what. That's basically.
Yeah, that's a
big revelation.
It is,
and maybe it's a lie to help encourage her, but we don't know unless they revealed it and I didn't see it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting too because it, it's like we have Pilot and Aaron becoming closer as the show is moving forward, and it's like we're talking about how Crichton and Jelena really hit it off because they're both very technical, scientific people, and it kind of explains why there isn't as much of that connection between Pilot and Crichton, because Pilot, he likes to have this demeanor of being the guy who knows everything, but he isn't someone that really wants to sit down and talk science with Crichton.
I feel like I think I'm getting a handle on Pilot. He's very procedural. Do you know what I mean? He's very orderly and procedural, but he's not necessarily brilliant, right? And so
exactly.
So he's the guy who, just by the fact that when he sits down at the computer to work, he puts his pad of paper and his pen in the right place, and everything's in order, he gets stuff done. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And Crichton might be more intelligent, but isn't orderly enough to necessarily get things done.
Crichton, yeah, Crichton. But on the other hand, Crichton can be very good at thinking by the seat of his pants too.
Yeah.
So
Though
it kind of balances.
he needs to work on his movie references. I think his movie references are really just bad in general.
There's it's like how aliens in TV shows always have kind of the cliche thing about the alien race, and it's like I remember joking with a friend of mine when I was watching this that it's like, watching Crichton, it's like your takeaway is that humans are the pop culture race.
Yeah.
That's what they are. They're the alien race that makes pop cultural references all the time.
Well, it's just not good use of pop culture. I wouldn't mind a Titanic reference. It was just such a badly delivered Titanic. Ask Leonardo DiCaprio. Like, no person would ever say that, really. Do you know what I mean? Like that was the problem I had. Yeah,
that was a bad one. Yeah. Now, I feel like to an extent, Crichton likes throwing these things out there all the time, almost for himself. Like he's completely in this alien world, and it's like he's just trying to make any references to Earth that he can at any point, just to hang on.
And it does emphasize his awkwardness, because it is like the person who's maybe a little bit behind the conversation in the room who makes that reference, and nobody really likes the reference, and they're all vaguely annoyed at the person, and there's a slight awkwardness that follows. That's kind of how all of his references feel. So maybe it's intentional to highlight his isolation and his just general lack of feeling a part of anything. But but either way, I think that Leo one really stuck out at me.
That was a bad one. Yeah, I agree. That one leapt out at me as being like, whew, man.
And maybe it's just the distance that we have now from the Titanic. Like maybe when this aired, I wouldn't have noticed as much.
1999 was right when the movie came out.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it was 97, wasn't it? Wasn't it a 97 film, or am I mistaken?
Yeah, I think it was a 97 film. I remember that was the year I moved to Chicago. It was very big. I moved to Chicago in 97.
Yeah,
so
I mean now people might not understand,
but movie, I still know what year it came out.
Well, there was a period where you just could not escape the Titanic. Like the Titanic was, and it was in the theater for. I think it was kind of like Forrest Gump, wasn't it? Wasn't like in the theater forever. And I remember Forrest Gump being in the theater excessively long.
But yeah. Putting the show in perspective too. One bit of trivia from this episode for 1999. 1999, of course, DVDs were still new, and the concept of every show coming out on DVD wasn't a thing.
Well, you got them on VHS back then. That's how you got them.
Yeah, well, I don't know, but most shows didn't come out on VHS though, because VHS was such a having a whole season of a TV show on VHS was.
It might have depended on where you lived, because I used to go to Suncoast Video at the mall, and I would actually buy a lot of TV shows. I tended to consume a lot of British stuff at that point.
British shows would come out on British shows would have a season of 4 to 6 episodes, so they put those out on video. You'd always see those on video. But,
okay.
My point was, I'm not saying no TV series came out on videotape. I'm just saying it was very selective. It's like we hadn't entered the age where everything did. But what I'm really getting at is that the title of this episode, PK Tech Girl, like it was literally the creators of the show literally admit that was their scratch little thing when they were first thinking up the idea for the episode. They called it PK Tech Girl, and they never came up with a proper name, because who's ever going to see the name? No one is ever going to see the name for this episode. So there's two episodes in this.
Oh, because they're only thinking of it as a ephemeral show that people watch and then they forget.
Well, no, the titles are ephemeral. No one, because the title, you don't see the title at the beginning of the episodes in the first season of Farscape on the show.
Oh, you don't?
Think no one. No. They actually, starting in season 2, you will actually see the titles in the show itself.
Okay.
But no, it's never on the screens. They just don't think the title matters. They just think that, okay, no one's ever going to hear this. PK Tech Girl, that works. It's a PK Tech Roll episode, you know. And next week's episode, DNA Mad Scientist, is another one where they just
that was just what they wrote down. Okay.
Yeah, it's not DNA Mad Scientist. There we go.
This series does seem to be because I keep seeing 90-isms, but I also feel like it's very early 2000s as well at times. So it kind of makes sense that it's a 1999 show. Like there's a lot of stuff that's clearly from the 90s. I'm going to be interested to see how it evolves, like as 2000s progress, especially after September 11th. Like you get like it seems like a lot of shows shift focus after that. So I'd be curious to see if there's any impact on this show as we watch it. Not it's Australian, so maybe not, but
yeah, I don't know. I hadn't thought about that when I watched it, so maybe I'm not going to say there isn't. I haven't observed anything, but it is something to think about as we watch.
But I mean, even like not like 9/11 itself necessarily, but all the stuff that flows from it just like the war and like all these things were kind of infiltrating other media, even science fiction shows.
Yeah, I agree.
Like nobody cared about IEDs before Iraq. Do you know what I mean? And then suddenly they were kind of in all sorts of things. Do you know what I'm saying? In sorts of movies and shows, and so I think but this very much like the thing that really signifies this is 1999 to me is the soundtrack. That voice melody that they have at the opening of the show is like something that you heard in like every new age store in like the late 90s. Do you know what I mean? And in every bookstore you went into.
It's very, very 90s. I agree. That is distinctly in that area. But yeah, it's the only post 9/11 season is actually part of season 3 came out after it. But I don't know if they would have been able to. I don't think it would have affected production. Season 4.
It wouldn't have been like The Sopranos where they have to take out like the Twin Towers and Spider-Man and
but no, I being like I said, I don't think Australians would have cared enough to do that. But
that's another show we should do at some point is The Sopranos. That would be a very interesting one to do.
I have not watched Sopranos. So.
Oh, you've not watched The Sopranos?
No.
Oh, we're gonna have to do Sopranos at some point for sure.
Yeah. I've been meaning to watch it, so it's. But yeah, I didn't have HBO at the time it aired, and I keep meaning to go back, and I never do. So
my mom was a Sopranos fanatic, so she used to make pasta every time Sopranos came on, and so it was like a big deal in that household. You couldn't talk when the Sopranos were on. But yeah, it's a really good show. I mean, I don't want to deviate too much from the present discussion, but it's a really well written show. I think you mentioned that you like Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
And if you like Breaking Bad, I think you would not only would you like Sopranos, but you might be able to see some connective tissue between that and Breaking Bad that would be interesting.
Yeah. It's not something you need to sell me on watching. It's one of those things I definitely want to watch.
And I, Claudius. There are deliberate references to I, Claudius in The Sopranos.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. In fact, the showrunner actually confirmed that, so it's not like it's absolutely a thing. Which I won't spoil for you, but yeah. So anyways, I don't know. I think we've kind of wrapped up the discussion. Generally, we're on the 45-minute mark.
I think we're good. Yeah, I think I covered everything I had to say,
and so I do apologize. I know that we didn't have Wuxia Weekend. We did have an episode of Wuxia Workshop that we put up in between. So there is sort of something on the podcast for people in that respect. But we had meant to do Have Sword Will Travel, and I believe we're going to just continue with that into next week. And yeah, so and also we didn't have our Wednesday episode of this, so we're a little bit behind on Farscape too. How many episodes are in this season? Do we know? Is that
got it right here. 22 episodes in this season.
That's actually pretty. It's about the length of Babylon 5, I guess, right? It's similar.
Yeah, it's a season shorter.
I was actually looking at old Star Trek. Those are like 30 plus episodes a season. So if we ever do that, it's going to be. It's only 3 seasons, but each season will be pretty long, which you don't notice when you're watching it on rerun on Channel 7 or whatever local station does your Star Trek. But I feel like if we sit down and binge watch like we do for these shows, it might feel a little bit tedious unless we do like 3 episodes at a time, which might be too much.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll need to plot that out. But I don't know how many. Because the thing is, TV shows are longer back then too. So doing 3 episodes might. Well, I don't know. We'll see. We'll figure it out.
We'll watch the first episodes and we'll make a decision based on that. Yeah,
fair enough.
Because the pacing's different too in the old series. That I do remember.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So, though I have to admit, I kind of like that old-fashioned pacing.
I do too. I like some slow pacing. I've been watching some Twilight Zone lately, but yeah, it's definitely a slower paced show than Farscape. There's no question there.
And Farscape does have a lot of dialogue, but it tends to happen as the action is unfolding in a lot of episodes. So you do tend to get that sense of movement. But Star Trek was made back in the day when, like Twilight Zone, people were content to have characters standing in a room talking for an extended period of time.
Exactly.
So anyways, we will be back on, and again, this was Farscape, I think episodes 6 and 7, and so we'll be on 8 and 9, and we'll work our way through the rest of the season. And yeah, so far I'm enjoying it, and I think it was a good choice. I think this is I was actually thinking as I was watching these episodes, man, I really wish I had watched this when it came out. I think that would have been an enjoyable show to watch.
I know, I'm the same way. I completely ignored this when I was on the air. It's like my one of my best friends, we were hanging out a lot around this time, and we're just like, why weren't we watching this? Why were we not watching this?
I have a theory. I think the logo really just that's what caused me to confuse it with, like, what did I confuse it with? Firefly? Yeah. I had the logo never captivated me enough to look beyond the logo, and then I just ended up assuming all kinds of things.
I think for me, more than anything else, it's just there were so many bad science fiction TV shows in the 90s. There was just this glut of science fiction shows that did nothing for me. I think I just wasn't interested in checking out science fiction TV shows for the most part.
So now, what would you include in that? I know that we're supposed to be ending the episode, but what would you include in that glut? Because now I'm curious. What were shows that were
bad 90s? I can't even say. I mean, there were just all those syndicated shows that.
Well, how'd you feel about the Star Trek new series, like the Deep Space Nines and the Next Generation? Were those?
I never got into Deep Space Nine. Next Generation. I don't know. There's good episodes here and there, but I was never. I watched the first 2 seasons of Next Generations all the way through at the time because all my friends watched it, and it was sometimes okay. And I mean, you back then you were really hungry for anything that was science fiction. It was like, well, this is okay, I guess. But yeah, my problem with Star Trek Next Generation, I didn't like the change in tone from the first series. Just kind of the sanctimonious, and people are all perfect now, and nobody argues with each other. And the defining point in the first season, there's an episode where they defrost these people from the 20th century that they find, in cryogenics. And it's about how the one guy's an alcoholic and the other one's, they've all got these personal problems. And I'm like, wow, these are human beings. And it was like, the point of the episode was, look how stupid and flawed people in the 20th century were. And my feeling was, wow, look what robots these main characters on the show are, and how boring and uninteresting they are, was my takeaway.
And I'll do you the favor of staving off the rabid Star Trek Next Generation fans here and step in and say I actually did enjoy the Next Generation.
I was not going to save me. You're saving yourself.
Well, no. Well, I'm saving the show. I'm not going to make sure we don't both die together on this one. But I can understand the criticism because it definitely was more sanctimonious, and I think that was a period of time. It kind of came on the heels of the very special episode type thing, which we always make fun of. And I think it was a period when a lot of writers were just sort of indulging in, I have a pen and I can now. And I think we're kind of honestly going through that again right now, where people are mistaking the power to write an episode with being correct about something. And,
yeah. Well,
go ahead.
There were two problems too, because I mean, Roddenberry, during the time between the original series and the new series, we had all the Star Trek conventions, and we had this whole Trekkie culture started, where people started idolizing the idea. It's like when Roddenberry was working on the original Star Trek, he was making a TV show that was an interesting, pretty decent science fiction TV show.
It was very optimistic, though. It was
optimistic, but it wasn't. It didn't have an ideology in the same way that basically. I feel like Roddenberry absorbed all these ideas between the two.
I would disagree a little bit. Now, again, I do have to go back and watch the old Star Trek. It's been I watched it as a kid mainly. Do you know what I mean? But I had a friend who was really into it, so we watched it every day. And but I remember the show being very, in terms of the context of its time, being very political and having a clear ideology.
It was, yeah. I misspoke. I said it didn't have an ideology, but I feel it did have an ideology, but it was a pretty conventional, relatable ideology. Whereas I felt like the ideology behind the new series, where humanity's perfect now and blah 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 and all of that. It's like that wasn't part of the original series.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I see. Well, again, I'd have to go back to the original series. At least by Star Trek 4, I remember those tones being visible.
Oh, sure. Well, that was the same. You're going to get to the same era as Next Generation,
but no, you are. You definitely are. But I feel like I feel like they were I feel like the spirit of old Star Trek was very present in the new one. I think the problem really was more the delivery. I think it was the fact that it was done in a way that was, like I said, kind of Punky Brewster-esque at times. And a little heavy-handed. But I have to admit, I still enjoyed it, even though I could see the heavy-handedness of it. Like
there are good episodes. Yeah, there's no question. I mean, I will definitely defend certain episodes.
But I will say this, like a lot of the episodes, when they do make their points, it's kind of like watching somebody use one of those old inflatable punching bags that punch up and, they just kind of it really was a pretty easy shot they would be taking at whatever target they were setting themselves up
exactly.
For. And I remember there was a Hal Holbrook episode, which is a really good episode. I enjoyed it, where where Mark Twain comes aboard the ship, and it was kind of it kind of got into that territory. When I think we should honestly do both the old and the new series at some point, because this conversation is telling me there will be a lot of discussion to be had.
Yeah. There's definitely. I mean, that would make it interesting. I don't know that I'd want to do all of Next Generation though, because that's 10 years.
Well, here's what I suggest we would do. I suggest we would do all of the old Star Trek, because those are manageable.
That's an achievable. That's an achievable goal.
That's an achievable goal. And then maybe do I don't want to sit through the first season again, but maybe watch some of the key episodes from each season if possible.
Maybe do a few episodes from the first season just to get a taste, but not the whole thing.
I think that the Next Generation is best consumed as it was released, which is once a week watching it on TV. You know what I mean? Like that's really the way to watch it. And it's now a little bit dated. So but again, I'm probably not doing anything to stave off the rabid Star Trek fans here, but I think that I don't know. I enjoyed that series, though. I see merit in what you're saying about it.
Yeah, and that's my take on it. I'm not contemptuous of people that like it, but it just bothered me at the time. So
now, outside of Star Trek, were there any other series that particularly irked you, or was it mainly the Star Trek franchise at that time?
There wasn't a lot of science fiction going on, which was one reason I watched. I mean, Misfits of Science. I don't know. There wasn't a ride. There was the War of the Worlds '80s TV series, which was atrociously bad.
We had an Alienation show, which I think was a '90s show, right?
I think that's '90s. Yeah, I'm getting
early
into '90s then. I was talking more '80s.
Oh, because Next Generation was '80s into the '90s, so I sort of had Quantum Leap was another science fiction.
Quantum Leap, yeah.
I liked Quantum Leap. I thought Quantum Leap was a really good show, actually.
Yeah. I didn't watch a whole lot of it, but I thought it was a pretty decent show.
But it suffered from the same thing you're pointing to, which is it had
It
that sort of
does.
pontification aspect. And again, I don't think me and Adam are saying we necessarily disagreed with the political thrust of the arguments.
No,
it's just that the
no,
way it was
no.
presented was always so ham-fisted and I'm a writer, so I know what I'm talking about kind of a thing. And that can be, I don't know, that can be kind of grating sometimes, especially if the argument isn't made well, which is, I don't know, I think it's in a science fiction show, it can go either way. Like in the hands of a Harlan Ellison, you can really do exceptional work with that. But in the hands of a typical Hollywood writer, I think, it tends to falter. But
early '90s. I wasn't watching TV anyway. That was when I went to college, and
we had amazing stories too. We had
oh yeah. I liked the '80s Twilight Zone. I will defend the. It does. I mean, obviously, it's like any Twilight, even like the old Twilight Zone. Not every episode is great, but and the '80s Twilight Zone isn't as classic as the '60s one, but I think there's still some very good episodes of that.
What about Earth 2? Earth 2. Do you remember that show?
I never watched Earth 2.
That was one of the shows, like, I always say this looks like a show where I got invested in, like, the first few episodes and then it got canceled.
Yeah.
Earth 2 is one of those kind of shows where I got really into, and then I remember, I think it got canceled, like, the second season or something.
I just had the sense that show was going to die instantly, so I didn't watch it because I'm like, this is not going to last, and I stayed away. I developed that thing of when my spider sense told me the show was immediately going to get canceled. Like, nope, I'm not touching that show.
So, well, we've regaled people with our 80s and 90s nostalgia for science fiction series. So we'll be back, and until then, we will talk to you later.
Fire!